Hello, I'm Sarah Krasnostein. New York City, I love you, except for when I only kind of like you. And okay, yes, there are moments I feel actual hatred. But isn't that what all families are like? First, this love, or perhaps the thing that occasionally presupposes it, ties to place. The city is where my mother was born, and her father was born, and his mother, for whom I am named, was born. On my other side, the city is where a relative of my father, another Sarah Krasnostein, arrived direct from Russia to Ellis Island in 1903. For a time, she lived around the corner from the 170-year-old halfway house for formerly incarcerated women, where I spent months last year researching. Did other Sarah Krasnostein love how the late summer light fell on those buildings along 2nd Avenue as much as I do? Did the freezing wind gusting down that canyon in January hurt her teeth as much as it hurt mine? The city is where I roller skated around my apartment in winter. Brooklyn, 1984. Brooklyn, 1984 is another way of telling you that my father restricted his movements to carving the same corridor between work and home, that neighbors told my mother never to wear earrings outside of the house because muggers regularly ripped them out of the lobes. Brooklyn 1984's trips to that transcendental temple, the Brooklyn Public Library in Grand Army Plaza. Weekend walks with my dad for bagels, lox, and the Weekend Times, which was sold then with a thin pair of cotton gloves so that the newsprint didn't stain your fingers. Brooklyn 1984 meant Tar Beach on the roof in summer and playing in the public sprinklers that my child plays in now. All these layers, a strange glass to look through, perfect for such intimate and foreign places, memory, and the city. Still more on the love. I was 18 and New York City was my mother. Taught me what one wore and what one read, how to speak and how to speak up, how to find silence in all that noise. 18 years old and taking myself to the Anthology Film Archives and the Film Forum and the Rose Reading Room and MoMA and the Met and the White Horse Tavern to sit where Dylan Thomas sat before I was kicked out for not being 21, only to stumble into an open reading of Howl, a crazy puzzle of a city where every piece, including me, fit. These were the days when I rested by hiding in the Strand and St. Mark's bookshop, where I was learning to smoke while reading the hard copy Village Voice, at the cafe on St. Mark's that was replaced by the Starbucks that was replaced by the Soul Cycle building. Mother, mentor, partner. New York City was always the only living boy in New York City for me. Now, on to the times when I only kind of liked the city. Who would blame me? Have you tried to raise a toddler in a thimble? Winter is long. Have you tried to steer his hands away from the brown snow and the yellow snow, only to realize that the only clean snow is on a Himalayan expanse of leaking rubbish bags that threatens to topple onto you both at any moment? Have you gotten your period standing at the start line for the New York City Marathon in Staten Island, knowing that the closest tampon is in Manhattan and that you have to run to get there? Have you taken the New York City bar exam and had your watch stop midway through? Have you had anything tattooed or pierced on St. Mark's only to find it infected before you even get to the subway home? Have you kept and kept adding to a Ziploc bag of frozen cockroaches that you store in your freezer because your landlord refutes their actual existence? Have you been pregnant on the subway in summer? Have you felt relief that the thing on the sidewalk you thought was a giant cockroach turns out only to be a small rat? Have you walked home from the library merrily eating a slice of pizza only to find yourself staring down the wrong end of a gun, as if there was a right end? Have you been trapped alone by a hurricane you did not take seriously enough to prepare for, loose wires whipping on the windows of your Airbnb, while your single, extravagantly fragranced gift candle burns down to nothing as you huddle in the perfumed darkness over your dying phone like a terrified Liberace? Have you moved from sublet to sublet, all your worldly possessions in garbage bags, only to unpack one in preparation for a date and find that you took actual garbage off the street? Have you tried and failed to find your friend who was arrested for breaching her bail because she could not afford the medication that she needs to stop her brain from eating itself? Now we're getting close to it, the hatred. November 9th, 2016. The morning after Election Day feels like a wet, filthy rag has been dropped over the entire city. The one small mercy is the statistical improbability of actually interacting with anyone who voted for him. I step over a dead dog wrapped in a rubbish bag out on the curb of one of the city's most dangerous police precincts and into the family home of the conservative Mennonite missionaries whose work I have been observing over the last month in the South Bronx. It is a relief on that day that no one brings up the election. They do not bring up the result because the particular outcome never mattered to them, it being of the world and thus merely manifesting the minute ecstasies of triumph and defeat that are sufficiently irrelevant that they don't warrant discussion. I do not bring up the election result because the particular outcome matters very much to me and confirms my belief, long but before yesterday lightly held in the hope for change, that this country to which the city is tethered has ceased to pretend to care about the common good. By that, I do not mean those who actively seek to erode minimum universal standards of education, healthcare, employment, housing, justice, and public safety. By that, I also mean those who actually believed, that this 2016 election could have ended up otherwise in a country where the mass murder of kindergartners did nothing to reform gun laws, where people crowdfund their cancer treatments, where universal maternity leave does not exist, where the public schools produce substantial disparity in literacy outcomes between Black and white students, where a single mother can work 2 jobs and earn an income that disqualifies her from public housing, but on which she cannot afford to feed herself and her child, and where it is acceptable to incarcerate children of color because they can afford neither bail nor adequate legal representation. New York City, this is you too. Perhaps it was easier to actually believe that this election could have ended up otherwise if you didn't talk too much about the fact that 2 kilometers from where you slept, children went without medical and dental care, or that the signs on the subway you ever really took 2 or 3 stops north, jubilantly advertising free breakfast programs at school were only ever in Spanish, or that white faces disappeared after those couple of stops, or that 17 blocks from where you squeezed toothpaste on your toothbrush this morning, things changed abruptly, as if there was a rupture in the time-space continuum through which one stepped, always accidentally and with prickling fear, into another world, where the stores became shittier and then shitty, where gyms disappeared and libraries disappeared, and cafes disappeared and vegetables disappeared and people disappeared, to be replaced by 24-hour daycare centers and payday loan stores and bodegas selling loose cigarettes, and cracks in the asphalt of the playgrounds through which weeds grew long. New York City is a place where life expectancy plummets by 8 years over these few kilometers. New York City is where the other half has always lived, and I don't mean people with dirty faces startled in crowded slums by Jacob Riis's flashbulb. I mean the people with dirty hands who don't see structural inequality or don't care enough to try to dismantle it. New York City, I love you, but as Elizabeth Strout, who lives part of the year in the Big Apple too, has written, we love imperfectly. So on the 9th of November, 2016, when I am sitting in the Bronx radiating shame for actually believing otherwise, I try to hold in my mind the effect on my younger self of first seeing the symphony of the subway, where the braiding of bodies in motion seemed like a promise of human connectedness. On that morning when I am radiating shame for actually believing otherwise, I am trying to focus on my work and on raising my voice and the voices of others. I'm trying to hold in my mind, New York, the possibility, at least, of a more perfect love.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.